All right. It's Johnny King. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Johnny King Show. I'm here with a very special guest in my living room studio. Blake Horstmann, thank you for being here.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys may have heard of him through being on the Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise shows on TV. He and I have run into each other at the gym here in Denver, Colorado, sweating it out. And as I was telling him before we started rolling, I'm always so curious, as I used to interview people off the Biggest Loser contestants off the Biggest Loser TV show. Like, yeah, you know, people are put on TV and things can be portrayed very differently just for getting viewership. But then who is the actual man or the woman behind the scenes, you know, when the cameras and the lights go off? So that's why I'm so excited to have you here and maybe talk about, not so much about the show as it is just about men's mental health and just how it is too, being kind of thrust into the limelight.
Yeah.
Ready or not.
Yeah, that's exactly how you sink or swim.
Yes, and everyone probably thinks like, oh, if I could be a celebrity, if I could be, you know, well known, it'd be so great. But then there's so many things that come with this double-edged sword, I imagine.
It's very double-edged sword, very sharp double-edged sword.
Yeah. And even watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, I don't know if you watch it.
Yeah.
But you know, there's that time he's sitting in his hotel room. He's like, dude, I'm sick and tired of being, you know. And I imagine every celebrity goes through that, right? Because you can't walk anywhere without being like, you're in the gym, like, hey Blake, you're like, hey man, let me just get out of here, you know. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe before we get into some of that stuff, tell the listeners, viewers, a little bit more about you and where you grew up and your upbringing with family. What was life like in the Horstmann family?
Yeah, absolutely. So, grew up here in Colorado, small mountain town, B.lake, Colorado. And then, grew up there, and then went to college in Nebraska, Hastings College, so small college as well in Nebraska. We moved back here to Denver about 6 years ago, roughly. Lived different places here in Denver. But yeah, I mean, I'm so born and raised Colorado, big Colorado, you know, fan and everything. And my family, growing up, we're all super close, but I mean, growing up in a small town sometimes could be, you know, it's good. Also, double-edged sword. It's good, but you know, you got that small town politics and all that. And so I think I would say I was definitely very sheltered growing up, and even in college, which was like a small college in Nebraska. So that also impacted my, you know, my experience on the Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise, because I think I went in very doe-eyed, very naive, you know, if you will. So that definitely was an interesting experience. At least.
It's interesting to hear that. And what was if you don't mind me asking, just like your parents, and are they still together? So my parents, I think they divorced when I was 15, 16, roughly that age. You know, honestly, it was like one of those things where my parents were together just for the kids for a very long time. You know, pretty unhappy. And like us kids knew it. Like it was almost like it was hard when they divorced out, obviously, but like everybody's so much happier now, and it ended up being a blessing. So that was about 15, 16. You know? Well, and I only bring it up not necessarily to pry, as it is like, at least for what I do with men and my own mental health as a man, like so much of that was shaped by the fact that my dad was a workaholic. He was never around. They had a working relationship. My dad came out a couple years after my mom passed away that he was gay. Like, oh my gosh, of course, and she knew about it in the relationship. So learning it more and seeing it as an adult is different, but it still affects my belief and my feeling about love, what I do not want. I mean, no offense to my parents, but like so much of my focus was like not becoming my parents. And then I run into women who have the same exact fear, and we trigger each other. And it's just interesting to see how that plays out in relationships and dating.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, very much. I mean, because I get asked that a lot, you know, how did your parents' relationship affect how you like view love now and everything? And it's a weird thing for me because, like I said, I always respected my parents, and like me and my sister, I have a younger sister, and my parents always put us first, like almost to the detriment of their relationship, to be completely honest. And so I always respected them for that and loved them for that, but also like it seemed like I said, they were probably together, I want to say 8 years just for us. Like they would have divorced long time before that. But I don't know, my view on love, I don't know if it's necessarily changed a ton. It was very hard. My mom actually fell in love with another man while my parents were together, and that's what officially, obviously, ended the relationship, the marriage. But I don't know, they're both so happy right now, remarried for like 8-9 years, you know, they've been together with spouses. So it's one of those things where I guess I view love because like the way they loved me and my sister, and how much love they put into us and still do, and they're still amicable, and we do birthday parties, Christmases together, and all that. But I don't think I always say this, that I don't think it's affected kind of the way I actually love in a relationship. But and it's like you just said, like we can say that now as adults, but it still affected me very much.
For sure.
Yeah, when I was a kid, and everything. And it was very hard in a small town because the guy, my mom fell in love with, like my basketball coach and teacher, and so it was like a whole thing in a small town. So not easy.
Well, it almost probably seems like you said, it prepared you for the sense that everyone was up in your business.
Yes, very much. Like I found out things through friends, you know, and not my family. Like it was hard. Yeah,
it's really tough.
Yeah, it was hard.
What was your relationship with your dad?
So my dad also he worked a lot. He works for the U.S. Postal Service. Okay. And they worked like 6 days a week, 10 hours a week, and he would drive to Denver every day. So it was a good hour down to Denver, an hour back up. Yeah. You know, he did make time to he would try and make all my sporting events, all that kind of stuff. I was huge into sports growing up, and he did a great job of that. But it was hard on him just because he was unhappy with how much he had to work and how much he occasionally missed, because he'd come home, we'd eat dinner, and then he'd go to bed and get up the next morning and do it. So it was next day. He was a workaholic, but it was more of he didn't enjoy work, like he hated work. And so one thing I heard you say, like you didn't want to be like you didn't want to end up like your parents or be that person. So I looked at it different. I saw him work so hard in a job he didn't like and still hates. Yeah. And so that was me being like, okay, I want to find something I'm passionate about. Even if it's and I don't want to have to work my hands to the bone doing something I don't like, because I saw him doing that. And so that's how that kind of, I would say it inspired me to be like, okay, I'm going to find something I enjoy, because I saw my dad work his out. He made great money, but he worked his ass off and he was unhappy.
Likewise. And I think totally me too. And that's why I'm as healthy as I am, because my parents were so out of shape, but then also why I do have that drive, because my father was very entrepreneurial as well. However, seeing how he's now 73 and has been successful in his businesses, and yet, having a lump sum of money in the bank doesn't necessarily bring you happiness.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
And I think we are now wise enough as these upcoming generations to see we have so much freaking abundance. The fact that we can do this, right? Or even shoot this from our iPhones is like ridiculous compared to where past generations, the opportunities they had. However, why then are people more unhappy? Why are so many men killing themselves? Why are there so many, mass shootings like here in Colorado, or flying planes into buildings, or whatever the case might be happening in the world, when we actually should have so much reason to be
very
fulfilled?
true. Yeah, you're so right.
Right?
Yeah.
Any insight into?
So actually I don't know if you know this, but there was a school shooting at my high school when I was a senior in high school.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, up in B.lake, Colorado, Platte Canyon High School. I was 2008. Yeah, 2008. 2006. It was a man, complete stranger, no ties to the community, no ties to the school. Walked into my school with backpack full of rifles and guns and took 6 women hostage, and it was one student, female student, ended up passing. So it was that obviously also something that shaped me and shaped who I am. And I think I get a lot of my I don't know if I would say maybe anxiety from that, because I didn't realize I had a lot of anxiety until I went on the show, and then it was like, oh shit, because then I finally talked about it and stuff. But I think a lot, I was the prime example of that. I think a lot of men bottle things up, hold things in. I think they're scared to talk, to be open, to be vulnerable, because it's a sign of weakness, and it's a sign of you need help almost. And men don't want to be, they want to be strong. They don't want to admit that they need help. And so the stigma around mental health with men is it's something I had no idea about. I almost, to the point where I thought, we can get into kind of what happened to me in Paradise, but I thought that crippling anxiety and panic attacks and almost depression was a myth. Totally. And it was rub some dirt on it, get back up, go to work, do your thing, until I really experienced it. And then I was like, oh my God, this is so real. People live with this every day, and it's it's incredible.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's yeah, it's like a part of our character, which is, I'd say, I'd hate for any of us to go through like a school shooting, or I talked about on the podcast. I was hiking with a buddy at Long's Peak, and he slipped and fell off and passed away. Just PTSD or trauma that we can look back and be like, oh yeah, we're still deeply affected by this, but it allows me to feel such greater empathy. Versus, totally agree with you. When I was young, I was like, man, like, because I grew up pretty controlled, pretty well, privileged without a doubt. That I'm like, what are panic attacks and depression? That's a choice. Yes. And it's like, just stop being a victim. It's like all that stuff. And I've even had those stories about Black people with everything that's going on. And now that I have a perspective of so many of my buddies here in town that are Black, I'm like, was I so wrong? And that's just learning to be more mature, obviously, and have greater just awareness and compassion for people. But what, from that standpoint, what have you learned about yourself? And that's exactly what I want to talk about, which is like, not only are relationships hard enough, when you put yourself out there, you either get your heart broken or you're breaking hearts, if it's not obviously the one. And I've gone through a divorce, and that was the worst thing that I've ever been through. Without a doubt, the worst thing. And I felt like I was having panic attacks and losing my mind, and yet still the greatest catalyst for growth that I've ever been through. But having been through what you've been through, we all make mistakes and stuff like that in terms of relationships and love. What do you feel like you've learned in terms of either giving yourself greater grace, having more empathy for others, and just the importance of having mental health, because you're doing it live,
right?
But you're doing it, for the world to see. That's pretty brutal, man.
Yeah, I mean, I always say like the public eye for people can be like mean different things, because like I said, I grew up in a small town, and when things were happening to me in my small town, it felt like the public eye was on me, because everybody, But then you actually get into the public eye, and like you have people who are complete strangers and have no idea from different countries, and they're sending you messages, and so that's a lot. Obviously, everything's kind of magnified. But I would say the one thing that I've kind of gotten out of what I went through is empathy. Like and the ability to help you. I've had people in Bachelor Nation now. I'm like that person that people go to when they're going through a tough time, when they get a villain edit, or they say something stupid, on the show. I've even had other shows, like other reality show people reach out to me, Big Brother, Love is Blind. And they sit me down. They're like, how do I get through this? Like, everybody hates me, thinks I'm this monster, I'm this horrible human. And so it's a gift to be able to help those people, to kind of steer them in the right way, and to just give them, and it's like small things. Like sometimes you don't even need to say anything, just listen, because everybody's trying to help them, everybody's trying to show them something, or give them this tip, do this, do that. And sometimes just to sit and listen to them, let them vent can change everything, So
well, it kind of makes me think of what you said earlier just a few minutes ago, which is like, you didn't realize it was what you'd been through was not traumatic per se, but was an issue until you started talking about it on the show, right? Which that is, I feel like, the very first piece of healing, which is at least acknowledging and getting it out, right? Because either we have shame or whatever that just kind of builds in us, which again gets bigger and bigger, especially for guys who feel like you said, we're weak. We should be able to figure this out on our own. Whatever the stories that we tell ourselves about why we shouldn't express our emotions, or at least as we were growing up, and now things are starting to shift, and that's the whole point of the work that I do. But otherwise, that turns into a massive monster.
Exactly, and then it's just waiting to be released. And I think you kind of mentioned earlier, society and our culture, I think, is moving in the right direction. I think it's not as much of a stigma for men to seek help, but it's still out there. I remember when I was going through what I was on both shows, beyond Bachelorette, I was in my head a lot, because obviously it's very hard to date one woman with your friends. So it was just this weird, social experiment, if you will. And so I was very much in my head, and I was kind of emotional and kind of all over the place, as you would be. You're falling in love with this woman, you're in love with this woman, and she's falling in love with another man. It's a very hard environment and situation. But I remember even then, I got called by other people in Bachelor Nation, emotionally unstable, and that I was a little bitch for crying, or things like that, and it still hurts. And I still will eventually, every once in a while, I saw a meme the other day of me, and it was me crying, and it was somebody tagged me in it, and it was something like how many more bitch ass white men are going to be on Bachelor, or something like that. And it's even complete stranger or whatever, like, you know, it still bothers you and stuff. And so there still is stigma around it, and it still does bother me even, you know, even though I'm pretty open and vulnerable and I enjoy that, it's still hard when people be like, you know, you're weak, or grow up, or, you know, something like that. Be a man. Right. You hear that a lot, like, be a man. Right. It's like, what does that even mean?
Right.
You know, like,
which is interesting because it's like you're setting an example of a man that's more connected to his emotions, more emotionally intelligent, and yet through I would imagine, totally correct me if I'm wrong, with the pressures of being in the limelight like you are, it also is forcing you to become thicker skinned. Mm-hmm. So you almost have to become desensitized to, so it's like, how do you strike the balance between, because I get it too, I'm at such a small little thing, but just doing events here in town and like Facebook ads, guys are posting like, fucking, you know, fags and all this stuff, like, Jesus, are you serious?
Yeah,
you know, the things that guys write because men are getting together to support each other. I'm like, and I know that's just coming from their pain.
Exactly, yes.
And so I think that helps, and yet, you're right, it's still challenging to not allow certain things to affect you.
Yeah, I always say, and I get reached out to, like I said, a lot of people after the show's done airing, but not filmed, or not done airing, but done filmed, but not aired yet. Yeah. And I always, one of the things I say is, like, if you see somebody writing something nasty, it says more about them than it does you. Like, their insecurities are showing through, they're scared, they're whatever. But like I said, it still hurts. And the metaphor I always use is basically, you don't necessarily, it still hurts no matter what. Like, if you see a negative comment, you see something, an insult, it hurts. But it's almost like working out. So like, you work out, the next day it hurts, but maybe, you know, the first time you work out, it hurts for a week. And then it slowly gets better. You know, every time you work out, so it gets better. So I say, an insult will hurt right away still, but you'll get that thicker skin, you'll get the muscle, and it'll roll off your back easier. So it's still okay that it hurts, because it will, but you just get over it quicker. You get a thicker skin, and that's kind of like, you know, working out, you just get stronger and stronger. So.
Which I refer to as emotional fitness.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right? Like, you're emotionally fit such that when the shitstorm comes, because it certainly will, and I feel like that is part of, like, I'm choosing into, you know, being a leader in my community. You were kind of thrust into it in some regards, and you either get stronger or you're going to collapse under the weight of it, right? Yeah. And I'm sure we've all had our...
I say, and unfortunately, I know people who have collapsed, because kind of the show chews you up and spits you out. It's like, they more or less, I mean, you use the show, but they use you, and then you're thrown in the spotlight, and then you don't hear from them again. You know, unless you're like, they want you on another show, like, you don't hear from them again. And it's very hard to, like, cope with literally overnight. Like, I remember the first episode, I had the first date of the season on The Bachelorette. Overnight, the next day, I went out to a bar, and it was like, everybody knew me and everybody wanted to take pictures. So it was like really a hard thing. And show's getting better. They're actually gonna like have a team now who like works with people and a lot more mental health, and they actually find therapists for people and that kind of thing, because I think they're starting to realize, like, especially in the social media age, what that can do to people's mental health.
Well, it'll only take one of those participants probably killing themselves for them to be like...
And I know multiple that have been very close. Yeah,
right.
I mean, there was moments when I was like, I didn't know if when I went through what I went in Paradise, I was like, I don't know if I want to live. Like, I just felt like everybody was like, everybody I had known or met over the last like year or two just stabbed me in the back. Didn't care about me, used me for likes, views, tweets. I felt like I had nobody close to me, and I was so alone, and it was hard. It was super, super hard.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you being on the show. Seriously, dude, because it's like, I'm just another dude that just walks up to you in the gym, and it's, you know, again, and I get just too little reaching out, like, hey, can we grab coffee? And there's part of me that's always kind of resistant, because I'm like, I don't have the time, man, and I have to keep just like, again, that's my ego trying to protect me or whatever. There's a part of me that again, just appreciate you showing up and just having this healthy conversation, because it's like, what are they looking to get out of me? You know, am I just getting extracted all the time? And that to me is frustrating, where I'm like, yes, like, you're sitting here next to me because of your experiences, you know? And yet I've also had some of my greatest bros who no one knows them from the next guy, just because we have great conversations when we're sitting having dinner, and I'm like, I want to capture this. That's why I want it to be is anyone and everyone, but we're all men. Well, and I know a lot of women listen to this too. It's like, we're all human beings. And the mental health, we can all, I talk about the science of achievement, we can all achieve things. And yet, are we happy at the end of the day? Or are we like wanting to end it, even though we, on paper or on social media, everything looks great?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
I think that's probably maybe a big challenge for being thrust into the limelight you have, and then your reputation, which is kind of all we got, or our word or our sense of integrity can be kind of spun, right? And it probably doesn't feel fair, and then you're like, what the hell?
There's a lot of like anger built up, frustration.
How do you deal with just some of the rawest, hardest moments when you feel like you're all alone? And
so I'll just quick do like a synopsis of Paradise. And basically, so I went in, so Paradise is like the all-star show, if you will, of like Bachelor, Bachelorette, where they take men from the Bachelorette, women from the Bachelor, throw them on the beach in Mexico. Everybody dates each other, and it's a lot more dramatic, you know, if they will. It's a lot more like MTV type show, if you will. So I went in that show, probably the most, if you will, popular, I guess, males, like one of the more popular male contestants. And that obviously put, quite a bit of a big target on me.
For sure. Pressure.
Yeah, and I should have known this, but this is proven, you know, true in past seasons that the like most popular guy, there's nowhere to go but down. Like there's nowhere to go but down. Right. And the producers do this, and the producers know this, and they use it to their advantage, and they edited me to be a monster, like just somebody who uses women, discards them, ghosts them, plays them, silences them, all of this stuff, and none of it was true. And unfortunately, I had to release evidence. I had to release text messages to prove that. So not only was I getting burned, a lot of people understood why I did that, and especially now, I think people look back and are like, he had to, like, he was literally like painted as a sexual predator to the world.
But painted into a corner where you're kind of in a lose-lose.
Lose-lose, and that's exactly what it was. And you know, and people, I think, like I said, some people looking back now have like changed because at first it's like, oh, you release text messages, but then you read the text messages and you watch a show and you're like, damn, did you really have another choice, you know? Yeah. But so I got hate on the show and like the edit I got, but then I also got hate for releasing text messages. So it was, like you said, it was a lose-lose, and I was in a very, very dark place to the point where it was the first time I've ever been legitimately depressed, where I couldn't get out of bed. And it was so hard because I thought it was, like I said before, I was like, these people who like lay in bed for days, like they're weak, you know? And then it happened to me where I'd sit there and be like, okay, tomorrow, I get out of bed, I'm gonna go walk around the block, I'm gonna go take a jog. And I couldn't do it. I wake up and I just couldn't do it because I was just so broken.
Well, where was, if you don't mind me, like in those moments, where was your mind going? Like, was it just like, there's no point getting out of bed? Because all you're gonna be faced with more of the weight? Or what?
I think I was just good question, yeah. So I think I was just so like beat down, and I just felt like I couldn't do anything right. And like everything that I had done, and like I did make mistakes. There were mistakes made. Like I'm not gonna say I didn't. Everybody does, but unfortunately my mistakes were on national television. Right. But yeah, in those moments, I think it was just more of like it's even hard to explain. Like it really is almost like a chemical imbalance where, you know, I just felt like it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it to get out of bed. Like it wasn't worth it to leave my home. And that was really hard for me because I've always been somebody who's very active. I've always been somebody who works out, and who's honestly, like if you ask my friends, like I'm always the happiest guy in the room, life of the party. So it was such a just dramatic change for me mentally, where I was confused. I was like, why am I feeling this way? Why can't I get out of bed? And I would talk to therapists on the phone, and you know, it was hard. And I finally did end up going to therapy. I'm still going. And that was a year now. It was a year ago. So I got home June 22nd last year from Paradise. So it's been about a year now, and I still have bad days, good days and bad days, for sure. But I'm 1,000% better than I was a year ago.
Big part of it being therapy.
Big part of it being therapy.
Talking, like confronting it versus.
Yeah, and we just kind of talked about like I had a lot of anger and frustration, and sometimes I still catch myself getting angry. Sure. Whether it's like the producers and what they did and how they edited me to the point where they like use words from different things and melded them together to make me say something really horrible, and that, and like the people down those, I got bullied really bad down on that beach. And so it was like forgiving people. I just had to forgive because I had so much anger and frustration built up inside me, and I couldn't let go, and I couldn't be who I wanted to be, and I couldn't be my old self. And so that was really, really hard. Yeah.
I think thank you for sharing it, because I think that's where so many guys are, because I do know, at least in terms of the monthly men's meetings that I put on, they're all free. Guys come in, there'll be 50, 60, 70, sometimes 80 of us all in a room, and the most common response to this is like, I didn't know that other guys were feeling this way.
Yes.
Because we don't sit around and talk about this, typically, especially, again, relative strangers to sit down, which again I appreciate you so much, be like, but this is what I do. It's like, and I think as soon as I start to open up and be like, dude, I was so alone, all these things, this is what caused my marriage to fall apart, this and this and this and this, and like, guys are like, me too. I didn't realize I'm not alone. And I think that's the important part, because women typically, stereotypically, let's just say broad brush, tend to get together and talk about their feelings a lot more than we do.
A lot more, yeah.
We'll get together and we'll watch the game, or we'll do it, but it's like, how you doing, man? Like, oh, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Jobs is kind of stressing me out. Cool, but there's not like, well, how are you really doing?
Right.
You know, or like, I don't know, man, I've got a porn addiction. It's like, we don't talk about our chinks in our armor, because we want to be...
You almost peacock when you're in front of other guys.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, kind of, yeah. And I completely agree, because it happened for me. Like, when I got on the show, I'd never really been asked. And producers are, in the moment, they really are like therapists. Like, you sit for hours and talk to these producers on camera. But all of a sudden, it was like a switch flipped. And all of a sudden I was just spilling, like, everything, you know, like all my insecurities, I was so vulnerable. I was talking about my parents' divorce, school shooting, all these things. And I was like, it was just like word vomit. I was like, what is happening? And then I come home, and it was really hard for me when I came home from the show too, because I didn't have anybody to do that with. You know, it was like all of a sudden, they put you on a plane, you're home, and you don't have that person to talk to every day. You don't have that person to open up to every day and talk about how you're feeling. So that was really hard coming back, because I had to like find somebody to do that with, because even my family really doesn't do that. Yeah. But if I asked a friend, you know, like you just said, another guy or something, we sit down, have a couple beers, and like 3 hours later, he's spilling his guts to me, and he's like tearing up, you know, and it was like just this weird thing where I think men want to talk about it. Yes, and then I think when they get the opportunity, it's like, it's just like word vomit. All of a sudden, they're like talking about things that happened to them, you know, when they were a child and how it affected them. And it's a very powerful thing to like see that happen.
And why they're coming to you is because you've been through it, and I feel like they understand that there's a soft place to land.
And they've seen me go through it. Yeah. So I haven't done it in private behind the curtain or in a therapist's office. They've seen me do it on national television. Yeah. So they're like, oh, this guy's been through it. He's felt what I'm feeling. I can talk to him about it. And that is a gift.
And you're still alive.
Yes. And I made it through. Yeah,
you made it
exactly.
through.
Made it
and
through.
You've, you know, again, and I think that's the biggest thing is like, guys just don't want to admit that they've made mistakes, either in their finances or in love or their health. It's just like, but then to be able to see another guy, I think that it just gives so much, you know, availability to stepping into that for themselves and be like, okay, here's a guy that didn't, like, holy shit, you know, I have a hard time and no one really knows my secrets, you know, yours have been aired per se. There's a know, like, and trust ability there that probably creates some instant rapport with you, right?
Yes.
They don't even know you, and they're pouring their guts out to you. Maybe you get that.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. Like I'll be like at a party, you know, like a house party or something, and I'll be all of a sudden in the corner with this guy, you know, and he's like opening up about, he was watching me and he was talking about like his parents' divorce or something like that, and he starts opening up. So yeah, exactly. I think now I've got like a connection with some people, you know, and I remember I think one of the important things to remember too is I took a step back when I came. So coming off Bachelorette, I was all open, vulnerable, and very confident. And it was like, okay, people called me, you know, whatever, emotionally unstable. It was like, whatever, I'm not. But then when I came off Paradise, I found myself becoming incredibly defensive and feeling like I always had to defend myself, because that's what I had to do on that beach and, you know, while I was airing. And so thankfully I realized that I was like, I'm like, I would like lash out. I would like lash out at people. And that was because I had so much anger built up and I hadn't talked about it. So when I started to go therapy and I started to forgive and I started to talk about it, I found myself not being as defensive. Somebody like insult me, I would like laugh it off instead of being like, you're wrong, you know, that kind of thing. And I think like you can take steps forward, but then you got to realize too, if you start to like, say you not go to therapy for like a month, you start to like relapse, if you will, and realize you started building up again, which I had. Kind of got to figure that out and then go like talk to somebody, you know, and it's okay to like admit like, oh, I'm falling back, I'm being, you know, stubborn or whatever, or frustrated again. So
right. Well, you're touching upon a topic of like healthy emotional release, you know, that I talk about a lot of times. Otherwise, it does turn into either verbal conflicts with like, it's like friendly fire.
Yes.
They have nothing to do with it, but your loved ones or your girl or your spouses, your partners, they all end up getting the flack because you're not able to process stuff and get it out.
That's exactly right. I remember it was like the first time I'd really gone out since Paradise, and I went to LA with my agent at the time. She was great, and she was on the phone with me for hours when I was going through what I was going through. But I found myself at moments like lashing out at her, and like I was like, I don't know why I'm being so mean to her. Like, what is going on with me? And it was exactly that. I had so much just built up, and it wasn't her fault, but I like just wanted to, like, anything she said or did, I would just get annoyed and like lash out. And I remember coming home and like being like, why was I like that? I'm like, what is wrong with me? It's because I had so much built up, and,
Right.
and men are scared to release it, and they're scared to talk about it.
Completely. And or if they wait too long, then it does come out violently, and then it's almost like you're scared of yourself, you know, because you can't control yourself, right? And I've had those moments where I just kind of flipped, like, and I had so much shame, you know, even if it was on the sports field. I remember a few times playing soccer, like I lost it, and then I'm like, but I thought I had this all in control. I thought, like, am I losing my mind? Or so I start losing respect for myself, and then it's just a downward spiral.
And then
and then, like you said, it probably gets to the point where like you feel little self-worth and you don't get out of bed.
And it just spirals. It's a snowball effect. It's just gets worse and worse and worse. And I think I like would you say emotional fitness? I like that a lot, because I think physical fitness is huge for your mental health. Because I remember I gained like 20 pounds. I was eating pizza every day. I was just ordering Postmates pizza. Like, I had pizza box in my bed, you know, and it was like just a snowball effect. Like, you miss 1 day, 2 day, a week, a month, and then it's just like all of a sudden you're like, how did I get here? How am I here right now? I was actually going to talk, because you talked about like sometimes it'll burst out in like violence, and I don't know if you've heard, like a month ago, there was like it was like 2-3 weeks ago, there was that shooting downtown. Did you hear about that live shooting? Like, that guy must have, like, he literally just snapped, you know, and like I remember thinking, like, what, that guy must have had so many inner demons to just suddenly snap at a complete stranger and shoot through a window. Like, that's horrible, you know. And I was like, if somebody would have just had him open up, like, a life could have been saved, you know. It's like, it's hard to think about, like, just a simple conversation could have saved a life. You know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I see it a lot on the roads. I mean, we all probably see it on the roads where two cars are going at you, and you're like, oh my God, like, you guys have no idea how thin of a line you're on before someone's and you're going to pull in a bunch of other innocent people. But that is literally like a great metaphor, as I'm saying it, for life. We have a lot of people that are trigger hairs away from like snapping on the road when we're speeding down the road at 60, 70 miles an hour, which you may not come back from that.
That is really scary to think about.
We're all sharing the same road in the same way that we're all sharing life, you know, and the fact that it doesn't happen, I think that's why we just keep seeing the same patterns, you know. And it's interesting because we see patterns of, you know, black people being killed by cops. We see that come up. Me Too movement. So there's that whole thing. And I watched like Jeffrey Epstein and the Harvey Weinstein, like all these like men of power who are deeply insecure, abusing their power. And that, you know, you see like just common behaviors repeated every couple of years, you know. And it's just like I think that's why people are like, well, when is this going to change? I think it changes when I humbly believe that, like, just starting with us individually as men, because so much of it I do feel like stems from fatherless homes, men who are insecure, seeking power or influence when they don't have this and this in alignment, you know. And then like I empathize with you, like, or like Justin Bieber, or like if you get any type of celebrityship or, you know, whatever, like really fast, I would probably have been consumed by that too, and be like, she's hot.
It's a wild feeling,
I'm like, it feels so powerful, and yet I've also experienced that where it's also deeply, it's like empty, it's unfulfilling, and then you're kind of questioning, like, well, then what is all this for anyways?
And and you said it earlier, like, sometimes that lump sum in the bank doesn't come with happiness, and I've seen that firsthand. I've met, over the last few years, and legitimately hung out and become friends with a lot of famous people, like celebrities, and I've seen it firsthand where they're not happy. Like, they're not happy. They hate being in the public eye. They thought it would be fun to be famous, and then they hate it now. And the stress that comes, like, I know a lot of musicians, and the stress that they go through and what they go through on the road, and they're supposed, but like they also have like a lot of pressure on them because everybody's banking on them to make them money, and it's trust me, your hero, if you will, is going through the same thing that you are. That person you look up to, that athlete, that musician, they're going through what you're going through, amplified, magnified, and it's kind of refreshing to know that, like, they are also, you know, going through basically the same problems you are, because you put them on this pedestal. But trust me, like, most of them, 99% of them are not happy. I've seen it firsthand.
And I think that's why I do so much respect the few that at least look like they love what they do and they're happy. You know, like Justin Timberlake seems like he's such a cool dude. He's such a great
down to earth,
down to earth, has a great relationship with his spouse. But then we always have that like, yeah, but are they really? You know, it's like Lance Armstrong's such a great athlete, Mark McGuire is such a great athlete, and then you find out like they're all cheating, you know, or like, you know, evading taxes, like cheating on their spouse. You're just like, oh man,
another one, exactly.
And so I think that's all the more reason why, you know, it's good to share vulnerably that none of us are perfect because it makes us real, but then to still like keep a high standard for what it means to be a guy, you know, as an example for everyone else that's out there. Like, you can go through the shitstorm and come out healthier and happier.
Yes.
You know, not easy, but for me, it's just a big part of going through it with other men that allows me to level up in a different way than when I was always seeking support from my mom or my sisters or my female school teachers, or, you know, like there's something different about men relying on each other. Yeah, it creates a different dynamic.
It does, and I think we just relate, you know, more. And it's like, oh, if he's going through it, that's okay that I'm going through it then too, you know.
It's very, very interesting. Just in wrapping things up, do you feel like I guess the question is, what have been things that you've experienced over the last several years of your experience that has really been, like I said, some of the things I've been through have been the worst things and yet the greatest catalysts for growth? What are those things that have been the catalysts for growth in terms of your own personal growth or how you show up in relationships? Because I ultimately think that you probably still desire to be in a relationship long term, and like, but that's gotta be tough, you know.
Yeah,
it's a pretty broad question.
No, but it's a good question, because I think there has been like these experiences I've gone through, whether it be good or bad, with the show and in the public eye. I have grown as a person. I think probably the biggest thing for me is I've become a better brother, a better son, a better friend, because I think, you know, a better, like in a relationship, I'm a better spouse or whatever you will, because I think I'm not afraid to open up and to talk about what's bothering me, or honestly to sit and listen and what's bothering them. I've gotten more empathy. We can talk about that, like the empathy that I have now for sometimes complete strangers, let alone, but then, you know, my friends, I realized I wasn't the best friend before, you know, and so now I just find myself like realizing that. Once you realize that, like you said, like if you can admit to mistakes, that's like the first step. And like when I look back at like some of my friendships, you know, how I was with my family, it's like I wasn't who I know I can be. Like, I can be better than that. And I think just by simply starting a conversation with a friend, sometimes, like I said, you have a couple of beers and you're starting a conversation with a friend, and then like 40 minutes later, you talked about stuff that I've known this guy for 20 years, and I just in 30 minutes, I know more about this guy, you know? So I think that's the biggest thing, is I've become a better friend, a better son, a better brother, and, you know, a better man in every facet. So
that's pretty cool. And the last thing, I think you touched upon it, which is, and I gotta believe it's challenging, like you said, because and I know some of my buddies who are also kind of in the limelight a lot, you kind of question everyone's motive in being friends with you, that your circle of friends gets really tight, you know, and super important, I imagine, right? Because they're your rock in many different ways. And I often talk about that in terms of men too, like starting this brotherhood here in Denver. It's like, man, like we need each other as bros. Yeah, you might have your significant other, your spouse, your kids, but like there's something else to be about this. So in regards to that, with my last question, like what does that look like? If someone's listening, what are those important things that you look for in people that you surround yourself with, who you know, like, and did some, you know, like you talk about going through all that you've gone through, and you find out real quick who your friends are and who they're not. Right? Yes. So what do you go through to kind of decipher, someone really have my back, or are they just...
And that's such a good question, because I'm still kind of trying to figure that out as I go. I think everybody's obviously unique and every situation's unique. For me, I'm sure you did read it somewhere, because I say that all the time when people ask what you guys, like, I found out who my real friends are, because coming off Bachelorette, I was like, everybody's my friend, everybody loves me, you know, and then very quickly I realized, no, some people just want to use you. And so I think what I look for is, honestly, it's the biggest thing, and it's simple, is just, trust obviously, but that person listens to you, and I think the biggest thing is that they don't judge. I think that's an incredible, like, a powerful thing is when you can say something to somebody and they don't judge you. Whether it's good, like you can admit to mistakes, you can admit, you know, let's just say somebody's like, I've cheated, and then you open up to that person and that person doesn't judge you for that. So I think one of the biggest things is trust, obviously, and then if you can speak to them and they talk to you, they open up to you, you don't judge them, they don't judge you. I just think that's a trait in somebody that it's amazing, because like I think everybody's so judgy now and wants to like tear you down. So I think that's one of the biggest things is if they don't judge you.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Which AKA is unconditional love.
Yes.
And that's ultimately that is ultimately what I desire too in my relationship with my future woman, which is like, man, just where you can, I messed up, or I'm not doing great today, or I'm having a great, or like from all spectrums of good and bad, let's say, of healthy emotions, that you can share yourself with someone and it's all okay.
Yep.
Right?
And you're not afraid to share it. Like, I made this mistake, you're not afraid to, and because you know it won't change the way they think about you.
They got your back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, man.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Taking some time and having a really good, healthy conversation between men. If people want to connect with you, just on Instagram or
Instagram, B.lake, H on Instagram. Key and Peel Skill. Yeah. Key and P Skit. Key and Peel Skit. So, yep. So reach out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Aaron.
Yes, exactly. Jaqueline. Yeah.
Jaqueline. Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again for tuning in and checking out this episode. If you want to hear more, or if you have questions for myself or Blake, of course, feel free to reach out, and we'll catch up with you guys soon. Take care.
Thank you.